Welcome to the Missouri Leadership Development System On-Demand Principal Leadership Series. I'm Mike Rutherford, and I'm happy to be your host and guide for this on-demand series. The MLDS, Missouri Leadership Development System, is a comprehensive set of professional learning experiences designed by and for Missouri school leaders. This on-demand series is intended to preview, complement, and introduce a few of the nearly 100 leadership lessons that are contained in the Missouri Leadership Development System curriculum. Each episode of our on-demand series will have three components: a short video where I attempt to explain the leadership concept, a PDF file of written materials that will support each lesson, and a podcast so that you can engage with each leadership lesson in a mobile fashion should you decide to do that. We hope you'll find this on-demand series not only convenient and accessible, but also powerful and productive. Information on how you can engage in the full spectrum of MLDS leadership learning can be found at dese.mo.gov. There's also a complete listing of all of the MLDS specialists for your region in the PDF file that accompanies each episode. Thank you for participating. Welcome to the MLDS On-Demand Principal Leadership Series. This is episode 10, Communicating Clearly and Effectively in Turbulent Times. You know, communication is and has always been tightly linked to successful leadership. I like the quote by the former CEO of Air Canada, Claude Taylor. Taylor says this: "Certainly, a leader needs a clear vision. But a vision is of little value unless it is shared in such a way as to generate enthusiasm and commitment. Leadership and communication are inseparable." Now, look at Taylor's quote there with me, and let's pull out two components. He says that leadership should be, number one, clear. So clarity is important. Clarity is, of course, the ability of us, our ability to communicate in such a way that if 5 people who participated in the communication with us were all quizzed, they would report back pretty similar information. That's the definition of clarity. But what I like about Taylor's quote is he doesn't say that our purpose is just to be clear. He says, yes, that's the minimum. But really, the purpose of leadership communication is to motivate people to action, to make it memorable, to make it compelling, to make it actionable. Let's take a look at 3 different domains of communication for educational leaders and a few tips to be even more effective in each one of those 3 domains. The 3 domains are, let's look at some ideas for how to be more clear and compelling when we're speaking to groups. Let's look at some ideas for how to be more clear and compelling when we're speaking and communicating with individuals. And finally, number 3, let's look at some ideas for how to use listening to make our communication more clear and compelling. So back to idea number 1, some ideas for communicating with groups. School leaders do this all the time. Faculty meetings, small group meetings, presentations. Here are some success principles for being clear and compelling when we're speaking to groups of people. Number 1, remember this: all audiences are distractible. The human brain is distractible. It is survival linked in its design, and the human brain is designed to notice things, right? Not to focus on something, but to notice what's to my left, what's to my right. A really good idea, I think, as a communicator is not to try to keep people's attention. That's pretty much impossible. Rather, what we want to do is gain their attention, then 12 seconds later, gain it again, and then again, and then again. All audiences are distractible, and any communication from a leader to a group is a contest for attention. Number 2, practice, practice, practice. I don't mean practice what you're going to say so often that it sounds robotic. Rather, I mean every opportunity that you have to communicate to a group, take it. If you're working on a team and someone has to report out to the whole group, raise your hand. Say, I'll do it. We get better and better and better at communicating by practicing. So please take every opportunity you have to speak, to talk, to elaborate, to give a presentation. We get better and better through practicing. Tip number 3, feedback is the breakfast of champions. It's awfully hard to gauge the effectiveness of our own communications. Audio, video, have some people in the group that will give you honest feedback. Ask them, what was memorable? What was forgettable? When did I gain your attention? When did I lose your attention? Having people that will give you good, honest feedback will help you to develop as a communicator. And finally, number 4, when you're communicating more than just a couple of simple ideas, have a structure. Use analogies or metaphors or narratives. What is memorable about most communication is the degree to which we can fit what we want to say into some sort of a memorable structure. You know, in the Christian Bible, when Jesus spoke to crowds and spoke to groups, you know what I'm about to say, he spoke and used parables, right? It's harder for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Think about the meaningfulness and the depth of those thoughts. And what makes that so memorable and actionable is that it wasn't on a PowerPoint slide. It was embedded in a narrative, in an idiom, in an analogy. So those are the structures that help us as we communicate with groups. Let's look at a couple of ideas for communicating effectively with individuals. Number 1, when communicating with another person, be careful to match your verbal and your nonverbal communication. When those two things don't match, when your words don't match your facial expressions or your posture or your gestures, the person you're talking to, their brain, will believe the nonverbal communication. It's a survival strategy. It's much harder to lie with your body language than it is to lie with your words. In fact, human beings are awfully good at deceiving other human beings with their words. It builds trust when your words and your actions and your nonverbal communication all are going in the same direction. Another tip for being effective one-on-one in communicating is to be assertive. 4 types of communication: assertive, passive, aggressive, passive-aggressive. Assertive means I care a lot about you, and I also care a lot about what we're talking about. I care highly and equally about you and the truth. That's assertive communication. That's our aiming point. When we miss the mark, we typically miss it like this. We're passive. Passive means I care a lot about you and our relationship, but I don't care as much about the truth of what we're saying. So I'm willing to sacrifice the truth to stay in good standing with you. Ineffective. Aggressive, you know what that is. That's just when the roles are reversed. I care a lot more about my version of the truth than I care about you and our relationship. That's ineffective communication. And perhaps the most insidious type of communication is called passive-aggressive, where really I act like I care about the truth and you, but I'm really only trying to manipulate you. Human beings are awfully good at spotting passive-aggressive communication tendencies in others. Don't be that leader. Let's talk, number 3, about listening for a moment. The other part of communication skills is how to be an effective listener. Now, these are so simple and straightforward, I almost hesitate to share them with you, except for the fact that across civilizations, these things are not widely practiced. So let's go back to the basics, some ideas for how to listen well as a part of being an effective communicator. Number 1, be mentally and physically present with the person or the people that you're communicating with. You know what this means. Don't be distracted. Don't multitask. Above all, listen well and don't think about what you're going to say next. Human beings can tell when you're present. Human beings can also tell the exact instant when you stop being present. So clear the table, say to yourself, I have nothing in my life I need to do more than be present with you right now and have this communication. That'll help you to be much more effective. Number 2, assume a neutral listening pose. Try to be a blank slate. Try to be a blank canvas. If you already know you think you're going to agree or disagree with someone and you let that on, that's going to shape the truthfulness and the candor of the person's communication to you. So try your best to be neutral. Strike a neutral pose. Be a blank slate. That'll help. Number three, offer uninterrupted speaking time. One of the most amazing things a leader can do for someone else in the organization is not only be present with them, but offer them uninterrupted time to communicate. The key to uninterrupted time, you guessed it, don't interrupt. Number four, ask clarifying questions to deepen the communication and to affirm the person that's communicating. So you want to participate back and forth with the person. That's kind of an art, isn't it? To offer uninterrupted time and also to participate, but not to try to shift the conversation where you want it to go, to affirm the communicator and to deepen your understanding. I know that's a lot of information. Let's wrap it up with 4 quotes that help me to sort of bring these ideas for being a more effective communicator around to something very practical. Number 1, here's a quote from Andy Stanley. Leaders who refuse to listen will soon find themselves surrounded by people with nothing to say. A quote from Peter Drucker. The most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said. From George Bernard Shaw, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And finally, I love this quote from the American psychiatrist Carl Menninger. Menninger says this, listening is a magnetic and strange thing. It's a creative force. The friends who listen to us are the ones we move toward. When we are listened to, it creates us. It makes us unfold and expand. You know, in turbulent times, it's important to be as skillful as we can be as communicators. We want to do this in a way that is clear and compelling. Hey, thanks for your attention, and thanks for participating today.